Welcome to today's episode. We're going to talk about something that affects many people's lives but is often misunderstood: social welfare policies and programs. A lot of people hear words like welfare and immediately have opinions about what those programs should or should not do. Today, Megan is going to help us understand some of the theories and perspectives behind social welfare policies and why these ideas matter.
Thanks for having me. As a social work student and someone who works directly with children and families as a behavior technician, I see how important it is to understand the larger systems that impact people's lives. Social welfare policies are not created randomly. They are shaped by historical events, social values, political beliefs, and ideas about responsibility and fairness. Today, we are going to discuss three important topics: different approaches to social welfare, Piven and Cloward's perspective on purpose of welfare programs, and how critical theory helps us understand structural barriers in today's services.
When people talk about welfare, why do people seem to disagree so much about what the government should provide?
A lot of that disagreement comes from different beliefs about responsibility. One important distinction in social welfare is the difference between residual and institutional approaches. A residual approach views social services as something that should be provided only when individuals, families, or private resources cannot meet their needs. This approach often emphasizes individual responsibility and limited government involvement. An institutional approach views social welfare as a normal and expected part of society. It recognizes that people can experience challenges because of larger social and economic conditions, not only because of individual choices.
Can you give an example of how these different views affect programs?
Yes, programs like Social Security are closer to an institutional approach because they are viewed as a social responsibility and are available to people who meet certain criteria. Other programs, such as assistance programs for low income families, have historically reflected more selective or residual ideas because people often have to prove need and meet strict eligibility requirements. Chapter 3 discusses how American social welfare has always had tension between individual responsibility and social responsibility. Many debates about programs like healthcare, food assistance, and child welfare come back to that question. Is that mainly an individual issue, or is it something society has as a responsibility to address?
How does this connect to your work?
In my work as a behavior technician, I see children and families with many different needs. Sometimes challenges are viewed as individual problems, but when we look closer, we often see environmental factors too. Things like access to health care, school resources, family support, and community services can influence outcomes. As a future social worker, I think it is important to look beyond the individual and understand the systems that surround them.
One of the topics you mentioned was Piven and Cloward. Their ideas seem complicated. Can you explain what they argued?
Piven and Cloward argued that social welfare programs do more than simply provide assistance. They believed welfare programs can also serve as a form of social control. Their argument was when poverty and social unrest increase, governments may expand assistance programs to reduce conflict and maintain social stability. When social pressure decreases, programs may become more restrictive.
So you are saying welfare programs are bad?
Not exactly. Their argument is more about examining the purpose and history of these programs. They believed that we need to look critically at why programs are created, who benefits, and who has the power in making decisions. These this connects to both functionalist and conflict perspectives. A functionalist perspective might say social welfare programs help society function by addressing problems and supporting stability. A conflict perspective looks at unequal power and asks whether policies reflect the interests of those with more influence.
Can you give a modern example?
Temporary assistance for needy families, or TANF, is one example discussed through a critical perspective. Chapter 3 explains that critical theories examine who creates policies and who experiences them. Many policymakers who design programs may have very different life experiences than the people receiving services. A critical analyst asks questions like, were the voices of the recipients included? Are there barriers within the program itself? Are we blaming individuals for problems that may actually come from larger systems?
That leads into another question. If programs exist to help people, why do barriers still exist?
This is where critical theory becomes important. Critical theory looks at how power differences and social inequalities influence people's experiences. It examines issues related to class, race, gender, and access to resources. Instead of only asking, what is wrong with the individual, critical theory asks, what barriers exist within a larger system?
How does this apply to children and families?
A good example in children's mental health services, a child might need behavioral or mental health support, but access can depend on many factors outside of the child's control. Families may face transportation issues, limited providers in their community, insurance barriers, or long wait lists. Through a critical theory perspective, we recognize that unequal access is not simply an individual family problem. It can be connected to a larger social and economic structures.
How does social work respond to those issues?
Social work is unique because it focuses on both helping individuals and addressing systems. In my behavior work, I support children by helping them develop skills and achieve goals. But social work pushes me also to think about environments around these children and what changes may be needed. Chapter 3 discusses social empathy, which means developing an understanding of people's lived experiences and using what understanding to create better policies. I think that that is especially important when working with children and families because every person's situation is influenced by their environment.
After hearing all this, it sounds like social welfare policies are about much more than just providing services.
Exactly. Social welfare policies reflect values, beliefs, and responsibility, fairness, and human needs. Different perspectives help us analyze why programs developed the way they did and how they might be improved. Understanding these theories helps social workers avoid only looking at individual problems and instead consider the larger systems affecting people's lives.
Thank you for explaining these ideas in a way that makes them easier to understand.
Thank you for joining me. Social welfare policies affect communities every day, and understanding the ideas behind them helps us create more thoughtful and effective responses to social problems.